Welcome back, everyone. It's Thursday, August 4th, 2022. It's another great day on the intertubes. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Joining us, as always, on Thursdays, my partner in crime, Duane Patterson, master of the universe, HUGHNIVERSE.com, troll-free web surfing experience for Hugh Hewitt fans and listeners. Duane, welcome back.
Good to be back. How are things going since the last we talked, which was just a few hours ago?
Just a few hours ago. Well, things are going well. I woke up, so things are already looking up, Duane. And you woke up too, so that's good as well. The rest of it, maybe not so much. I don't know. I certainly have. I am very glad that I staked my entire retirement fortune on popcorn, because I think we're going to get a lot more of passing it around in the next few days. Bernie Sanders went on, is it okay to say went on the warpath? Are we allowed to say that anymore?
No, I think only Chief Warren goes on the warpath.
Oh, that's right. I think you're right about that. Well, he wasn't happy. Let's just say that he wasn't happy with what he called the so-called Inflation Reduction Act.
When's the last time that we actually saw Bernie Sanders happy?
That's actually a really good point. I'm not sure that I've ever seen Bernie Sanders truly happy, which is really a shame. He should retire and find something that makes himself truly happy. But this bill doesn't do it. And, we talked about this a little bit last night about the very lengthy rant that he went on the Senate floor. And I think
it went on for at least half an hour. It probably went on longer than that. I kind of lost track of it because we were doing the after show last night.
I think it went on while we were doing it too.
I think so too.
But then after that, he sat down with John Bresnahan from Punchbowl.
Sure.
And first off, Punchbowl notes, and so does, I think it was a roll call that I quoted here, that even the climate change provisions of this, which you'd think Bernie Sanders would be delighted about, right? Most progressives were. They were saying, yay!
Because it doesn't go far enough, right?
He quoted in the speech a letter from the Center for Biological Diversity that called the bill a climate suicide pact. That's a really good endorsement.
Well, because they don't like the pipeline in it, right?
No, I think they just don't like how little is getting spent. The pipeline, I don't think, is actually part of this bill. I think that's a side deal.
Oh,
because because I don't think they could fit the pipeline in under reconciliation. We haven't seen the text yet either.
You see, that's the thing, right?
Right.
Schumer is still trying to do a jam down and have a final vote on this thing this week, and no one has seen the proposed language yet.
Yeah, I think that first off, the parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough has it, right? Because she's already doing the so-called bird bath on this thing. And
I have no idea what she has. I mean, there may be notes on it, but you really think that they've actually put this thing into language yet?
I think they would have had to, because again, they've submitted it to the parliamentarian. So
Okay.
she has to look at legislative language, but that brings up a whole other question, which I'll get to in a second. But I did want to read you this exchange that Punchbowl had this morning. Bresnahan says, "You're going to vote for this bill, right?" And it's almost like that, you've seen that meme with, Anakin and Padme.
Yes.
It almost reminds me of that thing, well, you're going to vote for this bill, right? You're going to vote for this bill, right? And Sanders says, well, right now we're taking a hard look, and what I will tell you is we're going to offer amendments to improve it, and we'll see what happens. And Bresnahan says, okay, have you told your leadership about what your position is? Sanders says, we're going to offer amendments to improve the bill, and I think it desperately needs to be updated. This is a bill that ignores many of the most pressing needs facing working families, provides huge subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. So there you go. That's you must be referring to the pipeline in that. This is a bill that must be improved. And my question to that is, or else what? Because
but see, this is the Washington parlor game. We see this all the time too.
Right.
Let's say Bernie Sanders offers 2 or 3 amendments, right? And let's say a couple of them pass 51 to 50 with a Kamala Harris breaking the tie on an amendment, right? Let's say they narrowly squeak a couple things through. That's not almost never do these amendments actually end up being part of the bill, because what ends up happening is they do this wraparound thing where the final amendments they push through and it turns it back into the original bill to begin with, right?
Right.
It allows senators to say, well, I got my amendment passed, I improved it, I changed it, and then when all is said and done, the final bill is what it originally was to begin with.
Right. Yes. The wraparound, the final wraparound amendment is usually, although in this case may not be definitive, or it may be decisive, because it may be that in the end neither Sanders or Sinema will vote for a wraparound amendment on this. Frankly, both of them are saying they want changes to this bill, and the changes that both want are diametrically opposed to each other. Right? They're anathema to each other.
You see that, and that's the fun part about this 50-50 Senate thing is you have both of them, and no one is saying that Kyrsten Sinema wants to be president this cycle, but Kyrsten Sinema, she's thinking that she could maybe one day, run for the big office. The thing about Kyrsten Sinema is she has a unique opportunity right now.
Right.
By saying no, she can. I mean, Hugh talked about this a lot this morning. He talked about with Garrity this morning. She can get whatever she wants right now. And I mean, she could ask for the stars and the moon right now, and the Democrats would give it to her because they got to have her on board to pass this damn
Would
thing.
they, though? And here's my question. The more that you have Bernie Sanders talking about this bill as the so-called Inflation Reduction Act on the floor of the Senate, the more that you have him talking about how it's the Climate Suicide Pact, can they offer even more concessions on fossil fuel and corporate tax policy to Sinema while still coming up with some pretense to vote for this bill? And I don't necessarily mean Sanders, because, I got into a conversation on Twitter with Benji Sarlin, NBC News guy, center-left guy who's a smart guy. And I like Benji. Benji is not a flamethrower. He's a thoughtful guy. I just don't necessarily agree with his outlook on things. And he was making the point that, look, Sanders is going to come around on this. The question is not whether Sanders is going to vote no. And I said, yes, but the question is whether there's going to end up, so to speak, and I didn't put it this way on Twitter, but crapping all over this to the point where it becomes a liability rather than an asset when you're going into the midterm elections, because that's what they ended up doing with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. And there's been no benefit. Nobody's yet to see any concrete benefit from the infrastructure spending that's already been passed. So, I mean, they're really running a risk here that they're going to make this thing so toxic that even if it manages to eke out of the Senate, Nancy Pelosi might have a problem getting this thing through the House, especially if you're adding on stuff for Kyrsten Sinema. I mean, if you're going to take off that carried interest tax charge, which is $14 billion, not a huge part of this, but still, it's $14 billion in this. There's other corporate tax changes in here that are more significant that she wants. How do House progressives pass this? I mean, this is a shadow of the bill that it's a shadow of the compromise that they swore they wouldn't vote for, the $2 trillion version of Build Back Better. It's a shadow of that bill. How do you get House progressives to vote for that now?
I totally agree with you. And the thing is Kyrsten Sinema isn't holding this thing up. Her leverage isn't over changing the carried interest rate from 15% to 14%. That's not enough of a win for her. If she's got leverage, she's got to get something. She's got to get something tangible, right? She's got to get something that is going to help her in the near future in Arizona.
It's the drought relief portion. She wants $5 billion in drought relief. They'll hand her that at the drop of a hat. That's not going to be an issue. That's if she's got this moment of leverage, she's got to go for something big. Now, here's what I'm doing. Well, wait a minute. Before you get there, though, don't forget that she's been going to the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, asking them for what they want, for the changes they want in this bill, so she can go back. They're not concerned about the drought relief package. They're concerned about the taxes.
Right. And so she's going to demand some kind of, tax relief or an easing off of that tax structure, which is going to change the financial impact of this bill. So as a Republican, this is what I think is just grand. You've got one horse that is pointed this direction with two ropes off of it. Those two ropes are tied to half of this piece of legislation, right?
Right.
And it wants to go this direction. And then you've got Bernie Sanders, who aspires to be president too. Now, Bernie Sanders is like 140 years old, but he's actually run for president a couple times, right?
A couple times, yes, yeah.
And if he's going to maybe entertain the idea of running again, he's not exactly, a spring chicken anymore. What better opportunity than to sabotage Joe Biden one last time and make it so that it's basically an open season, so Bernie Sanders could ride to the rescue and say, we need to go farther, faster. The reason we've had so much angst the past couple of years, or during this time, the reason that Biden was a failure as a president is because he didn't go progressive far enough, fast enough. So Bernie Sanders has got another horse pointing this way with two ropes off it, and those ropes are tied to half of this piece of legislation. So I think the best thing to do is we encourage Kyrsten Sinema. We encourage Bernie Sanders. We have both of those horses march off in two different directions and rend this thing in two. I mean,
right.
that's the best of all worlds, right?
Well, for Republicans, it's the best of all worlds.
We want Kyrsten Sinema to ask for the stars and the moon and have the Democrats ignore Bernie for the time being, and basically water this thing down some more to the point where Bernie Sanders is like, no. And then they got to worry about keeping the progressive. There is all sorts of potential for mischief here for Republicans, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I mean, and the other part of this too, and again, I do think that Benji has a point. I actually do think that Sanders will vote for this thing in the end. But if he was really invested in getting this thing passed, he would have just offered the amendments. He would have just said, hey, look, this is the beginning of a good policy, and I'm not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. And what I'm hoping for is that we're going to revisit these things. And I want to offer some amendments to see if we can get some of these things improved here so that we'll have a stronger case to make to the House. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
I get that.
But what I'm saying is,
any amendment he gets, it's going to make it harder to keep Sinema.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not really my point. My point would be is that he would be setting this thing up for success by doing that. That's not what he chose to do. And Bernie Sanders, whatever else anybody thinks of Bernie Sanders, he's not stupid, right?
No.
He may be his philosophy may be dumb. I mean, socialism is a failed policy. It's a failed system, but I mean, he's not an unintelligent guy. He knows what he's doing when he gets up and says these things. And when you're calling
genuine.
this bill,
he's
genuine. I mean, he's genuine.
He believes what he says to a fault.
To a fault. And so, by the way, just on that note, I found out today that Bernie Sanders actually follows me on Twitter. And it's not like he follows 100,000 people either. He's got he follows like 2,300 people. Apparently I'm one of them. I have no idea why. So, hi, Bernie. Anyway, to get back to the point, he deliberately set out to make this thing look bad. And that tells me a lot about where they're going to go with this and how bad off Schumer is at the moment and how bad off Nancy Pelosi is going to be if and when, this ever gets to the House. And so I do take Benji's point that I think Sanders will end up voting for this no matter what. But he has made this so toxic now that there are going to be members of that House Progressive Caucus that simply are going to look at this and say, how do I explain voting for something that Bernie has lambasted as a corporate sellout, especially if Sinema gets some of the concessions that she's looking for. I'm not even sure at that point that Bernie's going to vote for it, but it's Pelosi can only lose 4 votes in the House. And that progressive caucus is something like 90-something members of her caucus. It's not quite half, but it's a big chunk of her caucus.
And not even to discount the block of the progressives. Keep in mind what we're talking about here. How many House Democrats are in vulnerable districts that they're already nervous about November as it is, and they're going to be forced to walk the plank to do a tax hike, whatever it is, in 98 days away from an election.
Yep.
Who wants to do that?
Nobody. But they don't have any choice because the reconciliation envelope runs out on September 30th. You and I talked about this last night. That's part of a budget resolution that expires at the end of the fiscal year. Now, they could try to pass another one, but good luck with that at the moment.
Totally agree. But how are there 4 House Democrats that aren't even part of the squad? Are there 4 House Democrats that are out there that are so worried about their political survival here that they're willing to buck the trend because they don't want to have to campaign on, I just raised your taxes. Sorry, everything costs so much.
Right. Not only did we hike inflation, but I'm raising your taxes on top of that. Yeah.
Are there 4 Democrats that are going to tell Nancy Pelosi, I'm sorry, I'm a team player, but I can't be a team player if I'm no longer in the game?
That's right. All right, let's move on. I mean, certainly this is going to be ongoing. We'll be talking about this next week, but let's move on to a story that kind of was breaking. I guess you could call it breaking. Happened this morning anyway. Representative Carolyn Maloney was on CNN this morning. I think you may even have the clip on this, Duane.
The Carolyn Maloney one. I don't got that one or not.
You probably don't, but don't worry about it. Representative Carolyn Maloney on Tuesday was in a debate because, she's running against Jerrold Nadler because of redistricting in New York. Maloney and Nadler, both of whom have been around Congress since, really before rap was a thing, are having to run against each other. And it's actually kind of brutal. They're not being very nice to each other in this race. Anyway, they were in a debate on Tuesday night because I think the Democratic primary is coming up in a week or two. And I think it was Ana Navarro from CNN asked them whether or not they would support Joe Biden running for re-election in 2024. Nadler actually had a pretty smart answer, which was, I don't want to get into that. It's not a helpful question for us to be discussing in the context of a Democratic House primary, which is true. He's right about that. Right. At least he's smart about that. Politically, tactically smart. Maloney said, well, I don't think he's running. Which, set off alarm bells everywhere. I don't think he's going to run.
I actually think I can play that if you want.
Yeah, feel free. She was under pressure. Carolyn Maloney decided that she needed to somehow, I guess, walk this back.
Yeah,
so this was her this morning.
Here it is straight from here's the original clip, at least from the debate that sparked all this.
Should President Biden run again in 2024?
Yes.
Mr. Nadler.
Too early to say. It doesn't serve the purpose of the Democratic Party to deal with that until after the midterms.
Ms. Maloney.
I don't believe he's running for re-election.
I don't believe he's
running for re-election. And I'm sorry it wasn't Ana Navarro. It was one of the other people that asked that. And the third candidate there is Suraj Patel, in case anybody's interested. So this morning, though, she went on television. If you don't have the clip, that's fine, because I can just read off what it was that she said. She went on television this morning and said, I happen to think you won't be running, Mr. President, but if you do, I'll endorse you. After apologizing, it says, Mr. President, I apologize. I want you to run. I happen to think you won't be running, but when you run, or if you run, I will be there 100%. You have deserved it. You're a great president, and thank you for everything you've done.
What a ringing endorsement that is.
Duane, in what context has a sitting American president in his first term of office decided not to run for re-election in his second year? Can you name me one example of that in American history?
When did LBJ decide to hang it up? Was that 3 years in?
It wasn't until 1968, and he'd already, technically, he was in a second term, right? Because he took over for Kennedy after Kennedy was assassinated. It was the first elected term for him. But he didn't make that decision until 1968, and he didn't make that decision until, I think, the New Hampshire primary.
And as bad as the Carter years were, I still don't think Democrats were openly begging Carter to hang it up.
No, I don't think. In fact, Carter didn't hang it up.
No, I understand it, but I mean, there was no open speculation and calling for it amongst members of his party in Congress.
Right. And although, of course, there was the very serious primary challenge from Ted Kennedy that actually lasted to the convention, if I remember correctly, and might have succeeded if Ted Kennedy could have articulated a reason he wanted to run for president in the first place.
It lasted all the way to Roger Mudd.
Yes, yeah. Effectively, Roger Mudd ended it. Yes. But I believe that nominally the effort was still in place all the way down to the convention, and Kennedy finally graciously conceded and endorsed Carter, but by then it was far too late. It wasn't going to help anyway. But I don't recall any other presidency, certainly not in my lifetime, and I would argue in American history, where a first-term president in his second year was being told by members of his party not to run for re-election of his own party.
Certainly not in
year two, 18 months in. He's 18 months into the presidency, and his members of his own party are saying either don't run or I don't think he's running for re-election.
Are recognizing that he's too old, too incompetent, and he's already a failure.
Right. I mean, just to say that I don't think he's running is an extraordinary statement, right? Yes. It's an extraordinary statement because it would be the first time in American history that a president had made that decision this early in a presidency. It's not that we've had presidents who have decided not to run for another term. We certainly have, but not in this, not like this, and not at this stage of a presidency. And even then, it's been relatively rare that presidents who are eligible for another term, even prior to the FDR thing, because most presidents,
even
abided
JFK,
by the George Washington,
even JFK.
President.
Right in 1962, by the time we were dealing with the Cuban Missile Crisis and all that stuff going on, Democrats weren't actively calling for him to hang it up because he was incompetent, didn't know what he was doing. Right? No. I mean, there was nothing of the sort at that time.
Well, he was also a very popular president too. He was still a very popular president, even while going through those straits.
Understand, but I mean, there is no analog in American political history that you can point to what we're dealing with Joe Biden.
No,
nobody wants him around. The electorate doesn't want him around. The electorate in virtually any poll you point to, the vast majority of the country, both parties, do not think it's appropriate for him to run again.
Right. And I mean, 75% of Democrats don't want him to run again. That was the CNN poll. That was last week.
But look at the polls, Jack.
Look at the polls, Jack. Look, fat.
Yeah.
And that was back when Biden was coherent.
But again, what that goes back to is the Democrats know they've got this albatross around their neck. And that's what they're heading into the midterms about. And that's why you got to look around and wonder if it's one thing to be in the minority, right? It's one thing for the Democrats to have to worry about going into being, a minority party again. But how many Democrats are in districts where they've got a choice of either finding a way to limp through this election and be in the minority and have a gig versus getting thrown out on your ass and then all of a sudden having to get a real job like everybody else, right?
Right.
There's a lot of these Congress people that like being Congress people because of all the perks and trappings of the job. So they're looking at this tax hike thing coming down the pike, and they're like, I'm in a district that's a D+2 district. I'm going to get crushed if I vote for this tax hike. The only prayer that I have is if I never knew these people and I try to sound as conservative as I possibly can for the next 10 weeks, and I'd stay away from this kind of nonsense, just out of pure political survival.
So, yeah, I think that Maloney's comments and her attempt to, I think she made it worse this morning rather than better. And
she doubled down is what she
basically
did.
She doubled down. And I mean, Jake Sherman says day 3. Maloney says she believes Biden won't run. I mean, that's who I got this from. I should have actually, I wrote about it. I think I'll go back and just hat tip him on this, just to make sure that people know where I got it from. But Sungmun Kim was another one who was like, wow, I thought I was going to take the day off, working on my garage. And then this came up.
And the added benefit to Democrats, if Joe Biden doesn't run again, Kamala Harris doesn't run again.
I don't know about that. If Joe Biden doesn't run again, I think Kamala Harris runs for the nomination. And I think she, at least nominally, she's going to be in the lead position to start off with. She's a terrible campaigner, so I don't think she'll hold it.
Do you think she even gets to Iowa? Because she didn't last time.
She didn't, but she wasn't vice president either. I think a lot of money's going to line up behind her. And I think a lot of media that's currently trying to avoid the fact that she's an incompetent fool.
Who is going to back Kamala Harris? The thing about Iowa
who's going to come out and oppose the first female woman of color who was vice president and is in the position to succeed Joe Biden? That's the question. Who in the Democratic Party is going to have the nads to do that?
The governor of her home state.
I know that he's positioning himself to do that. He's sort of a nutcase. He's not going to really gain traction. I'm not even sure what he's thinking, but Gavin Newsom, I think Gavin Newsom has already been sort of cowed in the past by the it's our turn folks. I mean, he got all sorts of crap, remember, for
Pete Buttigieg would challenge her.
I again wonder if that's the case. It will certainly be interesting to find out. I think you'd be more likely to get a governor to do that rather than somebody who's so immersed in Beltway and in current leadership that they're going to be very nervous about the equity now folks that are going to rip them to shreds for attempting to get in the way of a woman of color.
You want to know
whose turn it is, Duane? Whose turn it is?
Jared Polis in Colorado.
He'd be smart. He'd be a smart choice for Democrats. I've said that all along.
I'll tell you
Roy Cooper in
North Carolina. Yeah, he could. I'll tell you, the only one that really scares me on the horizon, as far as a Democrat that actually could win it and be sane, is soon-to-be governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro.
Yeah, Shapiro would be an interesting choice. I would say that Andy Beshear in Kentucky.
I'm not buying that.
He doesn't have the charm or charisma, at least that I've seen.
Yeah,
but he's handling an emergency situation down there pretty well. He's managed to get elected in a very red state, or at least a pretty conservative state, which is just now changed over to majority Republican voter registration. Right. He might be in the mix if he decides that he wants to even try it, which, I'm not necessarily sure that any of these people are going to feel comfortable running against Kamala Harris in this. And I suspect that is going to be a very big consideration when it comes to an open primary, which I think that they're going to end up having regardless whether Biden jumps in or not. He's going to have to fight a primary in 2024. He is just too damaged for the party to let stand. And if Biden decides to run, then Kamala has to stay on the sidelines.
Well, that's true. That's true.
I mean, you'd have to go back to the founding days of the Republic, right, to find a vice president who was running against his president, his incumbent president, right? Wasn't that Thomas Jefferson did that against John Adams? But that was in the days where the loser of the presidential election ended up being vice president, right?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily the same party, right?
It was almost never the same party or faction. So, yeah, I mean, that would be, you couldn't buy enough popcorn. There wouldn't be enough popcorn in the world to go through that cycle, man.
I think the number of people that would challenge Kamala Harris would be legion, only because everybody has now seen Kamala Harris on a public stage. They know what she's like. They've seen her campaign before. They know she's horrible at this, and nobody is just going to hand it to her because
you got to hand it to her because she can't win it on her own. You've literally got to hand it to her, and they tried in 2019.
Well, but if they hand it to her, they're going to lose 49 states.
Well, they'll lose 49 states just because she's a terrible campaigner. She's a terrible candidate.
So,
but they are literally going to hand it to her, Duane. My prediction is if Biden decides not to run, and I think that he's going to make that decision right after the midterms. I think that the first week of December, maybe the last week of the session in Congress, so maybe the last week of December, Biden is going to say, you know what, I'm one and done.
He's going to do the LBJ.
Yeah. Yep. That's my prediction.
If the Democrats hand it to Kamala Harris and they just say 24 is a lost cause, we're gonna cut our losses. We'll blindly support Kamala Harris, and we're not going to even challenge it. We're just gonna treat this as a write-off and play the string out. Use a baseball metaphor. If that's what they do, can you imagine the damage that will do to the Democratic Party in the 24 election cycle?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
because she's terrible at this. Yes.
To the congressional races and the Senate races. I mean, there are going in 24. There is.
The numbers favor Republicans in 24.
There is 9 legitimate GOP pickups available. 9 in 24.
Yep. Indeed. All right, Duane. We got a few minutes left because I'm not doing a news wrap up at the beginning of this podcast because we always do sort of the hottest topics.
Yeah, we kind of are the news wrap up.
We kind of are. But what were the breaking news stories for you guys this morning on the Hugh Hewitt Show? What was your top story this morning?
Well, as soon as I finished typing it up, we had Chris Christie on this morning, the former governor of New Jersey. And he said a couple of really provocative things. And a lot of people love to hate on Chris Christie, and that's fine, whatever. But Chris Hugh talked to him about Deshaun Watson and all this nonsense stuff.
Deshaun Watson,
yeah, I know. But then he just kind of, just as a throw-in, he talked about the 24 sweepstakes and who was going to run. And Hugh says, just as a setup to his question, and you're going to run, you're going to be in the mix. We know that. And he went on to state whatever, or to frame whatever question he had. And Christie let that go. He didn't push back and say, well, I haven't made a decision yet. He just accepted the premise that he's running.
So do you really think he's running?
100% he's going to run.
You think so? Because
100%. 100% he's going to run.
I'll tell you, this is like Newt Gingrich running in 2012. And it's not that I don't like Newt Gingrich. It's not that I don't like Chris Christie, although, I've had my, issues with both.
Sure.
Just because, they're politicians and, nobody's perfect. But really, I mean, that's yesterday's solution tomorrow. I mean,
I understand. He's got one, he's going to run. And then when Hugh heard that and bore down on it, he says, well, look, in 24, there's got to be 15 people on that stage, right? Especially if even if Trump runs, there's still going to be 15 people on that stage. And Christie says, no, there's not going to be 15 people on that stage if Trump runs. Trump clears a lot of the field, but it'll be down to 5 or 6, most.
Yeah, which is not good for Trump. He really needs there to be 15 people on the stage.
Now, you want to guess the 5 or 6 that Chris Christie said would actually run?
Let me see if I can guess. And you tell me you tell me how far off I am.
Yeah.
Obviously DeSantis, Glenn Youngkin,
No. That was the news hook in this, is he named who his 6 were going to be that were going to run, that would be on the stage, even if Trump were to throw his hat in the ring. And DeSantis didn't make that cut. He omitted DeSantis from that cut. And that just floored me.
Yeah, he's completely wrong about that. He's completely wrong about that.
Of course DeSantis is going to go.
Yeah. He doesn't have any choice. He's in the second year. I don't think Florida has term limits.
He's never going to. Yes, you're right. I think they do.
Because I think do they? Because I thought Jeb had 3 terms. Maybe I'm misremembering that.
I think Jeb only had 2.
Okay.
But the window for Ron DeSantis, he's never going to be more popular than he is right now. He's never going to have the name recognition and the platform that he has right now. He's never going to. The stars are as aligned for him as they ever are going to be for him to run for office.
Yeah, there's no way DeSantis waits another 4 years. He'll be out of office 2 years at that point. And yesterday's news, kind of like, and all due respect, kind of like Chris Christie is. The time for DeSantis to run is now, and polls show him being very competitive now against Trump for the nomination, even with Trump in the race. So who are the 5 that he picked?
Cruz, Christie, Pompeo, Trump. Who else? Who else did he say?
Now, see, I'm not sure Pompeo runs against Trump.
Cotton.
I see Cruz. I see Cotton. I'm not sure that Pompeo runs against Trump, though.
He's almost. Now, you see, here's the thing. Here's why you have to know about this. What did Christie and Pompeo just work together
on? Remind me.
All the drawing the maps. Remember, they were on that commission that they formed?
Yes.
The RNC assigned the 2 of them to work together and make sure that the lines were redrawn fairly. And they actually, after bringing key strategic suits that they won, they were able to get some states to throw away the partisan crazy maps, and they got some decent maps drawn, so that instead of it being Democrats redrawing from the census and adding 5 or 6 seats, it turned out to be Republicans plus 1 or 2 or something like that, right?
Yep. Yeah, you're right.
Well, that's because of that commission. That was a joint commission run by 2 guys, Chris Christie and Mike Pompeo, who worked side by side every day on that, and they're actually friendly about it. They're friends about it. So when Chris Christie tells me that Mike Pompeo's going to run, it's not somebody being an analyst somewhere and looking way off in the horizon and saying, yeah, I think he's going to run.
Right.
They know each other really well. They just worked together on this project side by side. They've had conversations. They both know they're going to go.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that. And I think Pompeo's made it obvious. I am pretty sure that.
Oh, he said Mike Pence was going to go for sure.
Yeah, I think Pence will be in the mix. The problem with Pence and Pompeo are that they're part of that Trump era, right?
Totally agree.
They're going to wind up negating each other.
Totally agree. But again, the news-making thing wasn't what he said. It's who he excluded. It's who wasn't going to be in there.
Yeah,
because that's the curious thing is, on what planet does Ron DeSantis not run? What does Chris Christie know about Ron DeSantis that I don't?
I suspect that that's a little bit of wish casting, because I think what happens with Ron DeSantis is Ron DeSantis clears the field. I think even if Trump gets in, Trump will clear the field of some folks, especially those who were in the Trump administration. But I think if DeSantis also gets in, a lot of the rest of the field will clear out, because the donors are going to go to DeSantis. The Trump donors are going to go to Trump. Everybody else goes to DeSantis.
And then everybody else clears out. And then what's the emergency fallback at that point? Because if DeSantis trips on a landmine somewhere, what's the fallback?
Yeah, well, I think that you're still going to have people that are hanging around, but I don't think that they're going to get traction unless Unless
the fallback is Glenn Youngkin, who doesn't have to worry about the big donors as much.
Well, that's true.
Because he's got a ton of money.
Right.
And he could jumpstart a campaign in a second.
Well, there you go. You've got it figured out. And you heard it here first on the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. All right. What's coming up on tomorrow's Hugh Hewitt Show?
Tomorrow on the old program, we will have the next installment of the Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Larry Arnn. And what else do we have? Sonny Bunch will be along with movies. Doug LeMaurice, who is a great sports podcaster, will be back because college football is about ready to begin again. We did this all season last year and kind of did college football talk. Why? Because it's Hugh's show and not my show.
Right.
We will talk about that tomorrow. Plus, I'm sure there's going to be something going on politically speaking, like what will Kyrsten Sinema do? What will we will encourage the split between Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrats, and Bernie Sanders, and hope that the three go three different directions. That's what we will try to foment on the next edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Well, that's good. You should definitely have that clip handy from Real Genius, the popcorn clip, where Kent says, "Okay, God, let me have it."
Yes,
well, it's
exactly
coming up.
right.
That's coming up tomorrow on the Hugh Hewitt Show, starting at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 a.m. in God's time zone, 3 a.m. on the left coast. And of course, tonight is the Universe, the after show in the Universe, HUGHNIVERSE.com, the troll-free web surfing experience for Hugh Hewitt fans and listeners. Duane will be on at 8 p.m. tonight, right?
Yes, sir.
Doing
Indeed.
basically the lightning round, going through all the different clips. And
if you want just a sneak preview of what Hugh may cover in the morning, or Hugh should cover in the morning but won't because he gets sidetracked, that's what I'm for.
Well, there you go. And if you're a member of the Universe, you can watch it, and you can watch the Hugh Hewitt Show in the morning on your television screens, also through Salem Now, which is a subscription app, so you can do it there as well. Yep. Duane, if not, they can listen on the AM radio dial. What should they do if they can't find the Hugh Hewitt Show on the AM radio dial?
I think you bring Kyrsten Sinema and Bernie Sanders into a GM's office and just have a debate for a while.
Yeah, I think you call it the AM radio dial suicide pact, not having Hugh on the, have Bernie Sanders make that argument. I think that's what you have to do. And then you'll get a station manager to put him on, but you could also just go to HughHewitt.com and listen to the live audio stream from there. Duane, another fun week covered here. We'll see you again next week.
Like a plan. Thanks, guys. See ya.
We'll see you soon, and stand by. We'll have just one more message coming up. Thank you for watching and listening to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube to get alerted as soon as new episodes get published. You can support the Ed Morrissey Show and Hot Air's VIP reporting by becoming a VIP member, too. Visit hotairvip.com and use the promo code SAVEAmerica, all one word, for 40% off your membership. Choose VIP Gold and gain membership to access to all of the Town Hall sites. Thanks again for watching and listening.